The mansion's library was quiet, sunlight streaming through the tall windows, casting patterns on the dark wooden floors. Vine sat cross legged on the couch, her fingers brushing over the cover of a book. Across from her, Jungkook lounged in an armchair, a book open in his lap. Jungkook and Vine are arranged married by their parents soon after their birth. The age gap between them isn't much. Jungkook is 3 years older than her. They were engaged for a long time, but as it happened against their will, they didn't bother to look at each other, let alone talk. But when they got married, they had to bear each other, even if they didn't want to. And in between their cute fights, Jungkook fell first. And now he is determined to make her fall for him, too, because he cannot live without her. Vine closed her book in frustration, putting her hand in the page she was reading, and sighed. Vine, why do I feel like you're staring at me again? She asked suddenly, her tone light but laced with suspicion. Jungkook, because I am. She sighed dramatically, closing her book. Vine, don't you have anything better to do, Jungkook? Maybe read that book you have been pretending to care about. Jungkook, I am reading it, he said as he lifted the book slightly. Vine, really? Then tell me what it is about. Jungkook hesitated for a split second, then said, it's about strategy. Vine tried not to laugh as she asked, strategy? Care to elaborate, strategist? Jungkook, it's a guide for tactical planning, he said confidently, leaning back. Vine, you're holding a romance novel, Jungkook. He glanced at the cover, realizing he had grabbed the wrong book earlier. Jungkook, tactical planning for the heart. He covered up instantly, which made her laugh. He looked at her, laughing, and he kept staring at her, as if he wanted the time to stop right there. She noticed him staring at her, and her heart unintentionally skipped a beat. She hitched and looked away. She cleared her throat to cover it up and said, when are you giving me the time to read something peacefully? Jungkook, you have all the time in the world. What's stopping you? Vine shot back. Your stare, everything about you. Jungkook, so you admit you have fallen for me? Vine stared back in his eyes. She didn't want to deny it too. After a few seconds, Vine, fallen for you? I didn't say anything like that, Mr. Jungkook. Don't jump to conclusions. Jungkook smirked. But you don't deny it either. Her lips twitched, threatening to smile, but she quickly masked it with a sigh. Vine, you are. Just go away. Jungkook, why? You can't endure me? Then why are you still here, Mrs. Jungkook? Vine, I'm not here by choice. If I had a say, I would. Jungkook, what? You would leave? Start over? Find someone less charming and incredibly less handsome? Vine narrowed her eyes at him and said after thinking for a few seconds, I would find someone quieter at least. Someone who doesn't make it their life's mission to distract me every 5 minutes. Jungkook, oh, so you think about me every 5 minutes? Jungkook said, leaning back with a victorious grin. Vine opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. Instead, she picked up her book and smacked his arm with it lightly. Vine, I hate you. He chuckled because he loved to tease her, and that he knew she was lying. Anyone could tell from her face, not just him. He rubbed his arm as if she actually hurt him. Jungkook, and yet you are still smiling. Vine, I am not. She started but caught herself when she realized she was smiling. She quickly turned her face away from him, pretending to read her book again. Jungkook leaned closer, his voice dripping to a softer, more serious tone. Jungkook, you can pretend all you want, Wine, but I see through you. You like this. You like my attention. You like us. Admit it. Her heart skipped a beat at the change in his voice, but she refused to let him win. Wine hesitated before she said, You are delusional. He got an inch closer and asked, Am I? Then why are you blushing? Her head snapped up. Her cheeks burned from blushing. Wine. I am not blushing. He backed away from her and laughed loudly. Jungkook. If you say so, he said and then laughed again. Her eyes widened and she huffed, flipping her book open again. Jungkook, you're adorable, little Wine, he said, shaking his head. Wine bit her lip to hide her smile and muttered under her breath, Wine, I'm going to find a new library, far away from you. He stopped laughing and said, Good luck, because I will find you no matter where you go. Vine rolled her eyes and turned back to her book, though her mind definitely raced at his words, making her heart flutter despite her best efforts to stay indifferent. Vine, why do you always have to have the last word? Jungkook, because I am always right. Vine lowered her book slightly, as if ready to retort, but when she felt his intense gaze on her again, she faltered. She hated how easily he could unnerve her with just a look. Vine, stop staring at me. Jungkook, I can't help it. He stood up and crossed the small space between them, his movement slow. Vine hardened slightly when she felt him sit beside her on the couch, the heat of his presence making her pulse race. Vine, what are you doing? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jungkook, proving something to you. He replied smoothly, and before she could respond, he gently took the book from her hands and set it aside. Vine felt her breath hitch as he cupped her face, his thumb brushing against her cheek. Jungkook, she started, but he silenced her by leaning in, his forehead touching hers. Jungkook, tell me to stop, Vine, he whispered, his breath warm against her lips. Vine opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Instead, she felt herself leaning in, her walls crumbling under his intense gaze and the sincerity in his touch. And then his lips met hers. The kiss was soft because he was hesitant, as if he was afraid of invading her privacy. But when she didn't move away, when her hands found their way to his shoulders and she kissed him back, Jungkook deepened it all the way. His hand pulled her closer from the back of her neck, and when they finally pulled apart, Wan's cheeks were flushed, her lips tingling. His forehead rested against hers, his dark eyes searching hers for any sign of regret. Jungkook, point proved, he said with a smile, while she couldn't meet eyes with him. She was so embarrassed at herself for not saying no, but still she was loving it. Jungkook, you still think I'm delusional? Vine bit her lip, trying to suppress her own smile. Vine, maybe. He chuckled, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. Jungkook, you know it too now that you're lying. Vine, and you're annoying. Jungkook grinned. I'll take that as a yes. She sighed, shaking her head as she leaned back into the couch. Vine, fine, you win this round. Jungkook, I win every round, sweetheart. he said, pressing a quick kiss to her temple. Her eyes widened and she slapped the book on his arm hardly as she got up and ran away from the library. He didn't see her expression, but he knew she was laughing and blushing at the same time. Jungkook, I will come back in 5 minutes, he shouted and then sighed. He looked at the ceiling with a smirk on his face as if he won in life. He closed his eyes after a few seconds, and then something that he could never expect happened. Her loud voice came from outside the library. Fine. I will be waiting. His heart skipped a beat instantly, and he huffed. Jungkook. She did enjoy it. He laughed.